S3 has proudly been based in downtown Detroit for 34 years. And I've just come from an event in Lithuania where we celebrated the opening of our first international office 25 years ago. And I'm very honored to be here today to introduce Mayor Duggan and Chief of Police James White for a conversation that I really think is going to be one of those things that you really remember about this year's conference. The videos that they're going to share and the conversations about what they're doing, it's really amazing. It's amazing work, it's amazing leadership. And okay, let me start here. First, Mayor Mike Duggan is in his third time as mayor of Detroit. He's the 75th mayor of Detroit. I think it's fair to say he's the most popular of all 75 of those mayors. And that's because he is a visionary leader whose commitment to revitalizing Detroit has sparked a renaissance in the city. Under his leadership, Detroit has experienced unprecedented growth, economic development, and a renewed sense of community. Joining the mayor is Police Chief James White, a trailblazer in law enforcement who is steadfastly committed to community policing and building trust between citizens and police. Chief White has fostered safer neighborhoods, stronger bonds in our diverse community. And interestingly, Chief White, his academic qualifications include a master's degree in counseling, and he even became a mental health counselor himself for a time. Together, they exemplify true collaboration and determination to ensure a safer, brighter future for all Detroiters. Thank you.
Please welcome Mayor of the City of Detroit, Mike Duggan, and Chief of the Detroit Police Department, James White.
All right, how's everybody? Well, for those of you who come to see the annual PowerPoint, it's going to be a little different this year. And we called it Addressing Michigan's Greatest Challenge. And of course, when the mayor and the police chief are here talking, you know that we're talking about the state's mental health system, right? And we really are. Because when the state's mental health system fails, people have psychotic breaks. You know who deals with them in this state? It's your police officers every single day. And in Detroit, Chief White's actually built a mental health division within the Detroit Police Department because it's what he had to do to cope. How many here understand how the mental health system works in this state? Okay, 2 of you. So Bernard Parker's on the mental health board. I'm really glad you raised your hand, Bernard. Since you're my appointee to the board, I'm glad to see it. But in 30 minutes, you're going to understand, and this is going to be a little different. We're going to show you some videos of officers on the street, body cam footage to see what it's like, and to tell you why, while you may not have given a lot of thought to this, and we really thought if we had labeled this the state's mental health system, the room might have been empty. So we kind of got you in here on the promise that it was the greatest challenge. But when you see this, I think it is a presentation that you'll remember. But Chief, I want to start with your story. So you grew up in a city of Detroit at a time. There was significant racial tension in the police department between black and white officers, significant tension in this community. In fact, the time the city of Detroit led America in the highest rate of civilian shootings by police officers. I'm guessing in your neighborhood, there weren't a lot of young men who grew up wanting to be a police officer, right? Tell us your story. How did you end up where you are?
Well, actually, there wasn't a lot of people in my neighborhood that wanted to be police. My story with policing came out of a tragedy. My uncle was murdered. My grandmother's oldest son and my grandmother played a significant role in my life. I had a teenage mom. I'm very proud of that. She's deceased now. And my grandmother played more of a direct parenting role in my life. My uncle, who was the leader of our home, was murdered. The police arrived at my home. I was a little kid, a few years old, 9 years old, 8 years old. And when they knocked on the front door to talk to my grandmother, for the first time in my life, I saw my grandmother cry. And she collapsed to the floor in tears. And I started crying as a kid because my grandmother's crying. I didn't understand what was going on. And this police officer picked me up. And he held me and he talked to me, and that just kind of made an imprint on my heart that I never forgot. And when I got older and decided that I wanted to help and contribute to society, I thought back at that moment in time and decided to become a police officer.
So you get out of high school, you tell your family, your friends, you're thinking about being a cop. What's the reaction?
Huh? You're going to do what? But no, that was my path, and I got involved in security and security policing, and then ultimately joining the Detroit Police Department.
And so your first day of the department, did you come in thinking someday I'm going to be the chief?
No, not at all. No, I wanted to be a traffic cop. I just wanted to ride a motorcycle and write tickets. But it changed quickly. So.
And so we're starting with a picture. The success Dan Gilbert mentioned, 750,000 people in the NFL draft smashed the NFL record. But you had an enormous amount of pressure on you in the last two drafts in Las Vegas and in Kansas City. They held the draft way away from their downtowns in huge parks where they could control the crowd in a central place, and it did very little benefit to the downtown community. Here, there was a significant group that says, we need to go to Belle Isle. That crowds this size, we need to put on the island where, we can control the crowd. But the downtown businesses, the Downtown Detroit Partnership, NFL, said, we want you to be downtown, and I was getting a lot of pressure. I said one thing, you're talking about for 3 days straight, 12, 15 hours, 250,000 people spread from Greektown and Eastern Market all the way over to Beacon Park and Grand Circus Park. I said, I am not allowing this to go downtown, no matter what the NFL says, unless Chief White says to me, I can secure this city for 3 days, because none of us needs the tragedy if we're not ready. And you studied it closely, and one day you came in and said, let's go downtown, I commit to you, we have it under control. How nervous were you about that decision?
Well, very nervous the morning when all the cameras went down.
Right.
And thank God you knew the right people to call to get those cameras back up. But we knew we could do it. The footprint was challenging, sitting right in the heart of the city. But we knew we had the officers' commitment. We had the numbers that we needed. Our strategy, my goodness, it was probably deployed the best that I've ever seen in my 28 years with the police department. The team was ready to go, and we knew we could do it, and it was great for the city and was great for the residents. So we wanted to do it the right way.
So you canceled every vacation day and leave day for all 2,500 cops and told them they were going to be on their feet for 3 days straight. And on that Saturday afternoon, 5, 6 o'clock, they were still smiling and greeting people. I heard more positive feedback from out-of-towners. I mean, how did you get that kind of culture?
We looked at it. We wanted to make sure that we had welcoming officers. We wanted the officers to be present but not imposing. We also looked at, which officers we were going to deploy. Like, we have our takedown teams, and they're not necessarily the most welcoming all the time. But we also had, we made sure the takedown teams would be deployed during takedown, but the community engagement teams, the officers who were doing the foot patrols that were engaging citizens and giving directions, they were happy. And all the officers were happy. One of the things that was unique about this is the excitement that the officers had at roll call. They were proud of the city. They were proud of the opportunity. They had heard about the Super Bowl, and they said, we're going to do better than the Super Bowl. Many of them weren't even on the job when the Super Bowl happened. So they were challenged themselves to show that they could do it. And so it was really just a great environment for the officers. The officers were in a great mood, few incidents. And then to smash the record, 750,000 people, and that doesn't include the 8 additional activations we had around the city, with approximately 8 to 10,000 at each activation. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
It was a day we're proud of, and I think it's going to benefit us for years. You've been chief now, what, 3 years?
3 years.
3 years.
Of June.
So let's talk a little bit about your report card. As you know, we are very metrics driven, as are you with your department.
Yeah.
But last year, remarkable. Historic drops, 18% drop in homicides, 34% drop in carjackings, fewest homicides since 1966. I said, all right, that's good. Over the years, we've seen it rise and dip, not dip this much, but the places like Boston, New York that dramatically dropped it, they did it year after year over a sustained period of time. There's a reason why you do that. First 5 months of this year, almost halfway through 2024, and here's your report card this year, below last year's level. Our carjackings that used to be 15 a week have been fewer than one a week the last 2 months. Talk about how you, the department, and the other partners have accomplished this.
Well, first, I want to thank you for the raises that we got our officers and city council. That helps when you can recruit at the rate in which we're recruiting and getting our veteran officers back from suburban agencies. But the way we address crime, I mean, we recognize that there's not going to be a time when we declare that the last arrest has been made. So we're not going to arrest our way out. We understand the community engagement component, but we also understand that there has to be a penalty and a punishment from the criminal justice system when someone commits a crime in our city. So we address it by going into the areas that need us. We recognize that everybody's not a criminal. We put cops on dots, and those dots are representative of the crime trends in that particular area. And high levels of community engagement, because with community trust, you get information that you wouldn't get otherwise. And we've got a great police department, great number of men and women that are out there working hard every day.
Well, going back 20, 25 years to when I was a prosecutor, I have not seen a time when the Detroit Police Department had such a good cooperative relationship with your federal partners, your county partners. Talk about how you built that.
Well, you know, Mr. Mayor, I mean, we know what COVID brought us. We know that COVID froze the criminal justice system. And we recognize that everything came to a grinding halt. And I'm going to say this, not just because you're my boss, but the work that you've done in that area, getting the courts to the table, getting the prosecutors to the table, getting those partners to talk about that end of the process. We've got officers that know how to make arrests, do investigations. We're data-driven, so we know how to investigate crime. But we couldn't do that other part. So getting the criminal justice system moving again has been tremendous. Sitting at the table and not worrying about who's getting credit. You know, crime has no borders. I mean, it's going to cross 8 Mile, it's going to go into Southfield, it's going to go into Oak Park. And getting those folks to the table and saying, hey, let's fight crime, let's reduce crime in our community, and let's not worry about who's standing at a podium taking credit. And it's worked, and everyone's at the table.
U.S. Attorney Dawn Isom, County Executive Warren Evans, Judge Frizard, Prosecutor Worthy. We had 3,500 people charged with gun crimes who weren't going to trial because of COVID. And that backlog has cleared out, and people are working together. So the year I started, Detroit had the highest homicide rate in America. But in February, you got called to the White House to lead a national conference on how other cities should reduce the crime rate. Now, what was it like standing with the president and addressing the conference at the White House?
So I can go to barricaded gunmen, I can go to narcotics raids and not have a problem talking to the officers or the media, but standing next to the president as you're speaking, let's just say for a second I forgot my name. But it worked out.
But you've made us very proud.
Thank you.
But here's a part.
Thank you.
It is absolutely fascinating. The drug shootings, the gang shootings have dropped dramatically. But you know the violence we're dealing with today. Last week, 2 brothers arguing over who the best performing artist is get so heated, one shoots and kills the other. A couple days ago, 72 and 75-year-old women sitting at the table, longtime friends, arguing gets so heated, one of them grabs a knife and stabs the other. What we are seeing is a level of violence which, you know, we sit with your officers, your command staff, who say no number of police officers in the world could have prevented that crime. And so talk about what you face now, because this is a different challenge for the Detroit Police Department.
You know, it really is. I joined in 1996. I came on the job, like I said, I wanted to be a traffic cop, wanted to reduce crime, wanted to do those things, but I could not anticipate the impact of the mental health system on policing and what we're dealing with and what we're up against. When you look at that 15,990 calls, those are people who called. What about the other several thousand that didn't call? And that's still, you know, representative of, you know, double-digit responses to mental health crisis on a daily basis.
So calls for mentally ill and violent, almost 25, 30 calls a week.
Yep.
That somebody is mentally ill and violent, nearly always armed, that you are handling. And so let's talk about this. Is this Detroit, or as you talk to chiefs around the state, what are they saying?
They're seeing an uptick. Nothing good came from COVID, but what COVID did tell us and show us is the impact on isolation and how it impacts a person's mental health. Now we can't unsee the crisis of mental health in our communities. Every chief that I've talked to has got an increase in numbers, nothing like Detroit, but certainly they're seeing in their communities an uptick of violence. Even in Farmington Hills recently, a brother shot a brother. We see it over and over again. We had, like you said, the two seniors that got into an argument, and the impulse decision-making and the inability to resolve conflict is resulting in homicides.
So let's talk about the state's mental health system and talk about how it works. And it may sound complicated, but in principle, it's like this. We spend $5 billion treating mental illness in this state. Basically, it's a combination of state and county. The state of Michigan runs the statewide psychiatric hospitals, and there are 4 of them. And they're supported by a number of long-term private facilities, but most of the care is provided at the county level. And there's 46 essentially county agencies, largely appointed by the county boards of commissioners. And if you have a need for treatment, it's through the community mental health system. You can be held for 72 hours at a crisis center, at a hospital, or a local crisis center. And that's been the division of responsibility. And it went from a time where people were locked up far too often to deinstitutionalization in the 60s and 70s, and moved to community mental health. And talk about that. Was the move to community mental health the right move?
It helps. I mean, I'm not against community mental health. I think it can be successful if done the right way, but it's not we need more. We need more than just community mental health, but it's certainly something. We need more availability of community mental health and accessibility.
So let's talk about what happened in the early 90s. Is the state, in a significant way, withdrew, closed the great majority of the state facilities, including Lafayette Clinic, which had an immediate impact in Detroit, eliminated the Department of Mental Health as a cabinet position in the state government. The state made a conscious decision to de-emphasize the state's role. And this is something that we still are dealing with. And do you think the state went too far in pulling back? You were there on the police force as this was happening.
Yeah, I think they did. I don't think they anticipated the impact of not having any resources for people in crisis to go. I also think that they didn't really estimate the impact from the standpoint of how many people are impacted with mental health issues and their families. I think it was viewed as someone else's issue, someone else's problem, but it's in everyone's living room or in everyone's family.
So we're in a meeting with the chief's leadership, and a couple of his leadership folks are talking about these murders, violently mentally ill people, and say, it's been like this since Lafayette Clinic was closed. The meeting ends, and this is to me as an attitude of helplessness. The chief walks into the office with me. He says, they closed Lafayette Clinic 30 years ago. We need to stop talking like this is a new problem. He said, I want to start a mental health division within the Detroit Police Department. I want to stop complaining about the problem and recognize the fact that we are the front line. Will you support me on the funding to create something within DPD? And I was just astonished. What police chief wakes up and says, I'm going to create a mental health department within a police department? But that was your plan. Talk about what you were thinking.
Well, we see it every day. And, I say it often, you're not going to arrest your way out of crime. We know that there are things that impact decision-making. We know when someone shoots someone because of road rage. That's not something that you can talk someone out of. There's something going on. We know when we're averaging a barricaded gunman a week and someone is isolating themselves in a home with a gun, threatening to kill themselves because their girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with them, that we've got a big problem. So we needed to look at ways that we could, A, safely handle these runs, and B, get the officers the training that they need, because we know we're losing officers. We've got officers that have been shot. We've got officers that have been killed by people who are in mental health crisis. And so this was just a pathway to do something different.
So we get a police chief who decides he's going to start this program. 2 years later, across the country, the Detroit model for the police department handling mental health is the center of attention. I want to see what NBC News came to Detroit to tell the rest of the country about.
We got one in the freeway.
Intense interactions involving Detroit PD's newest specialized unit, highlighted in body camera videos, some shared exclusively with NBC News.
Look, we got all the time you need.
An officer convincing this man to drop a knife.
Can you throw it away so I can come give you a hug? Please drop it. Good job.
Good job, good job, good job, good job, good job.
Another talking someone down from a busy highway overpass. Situations involving a police team assembled in January, fully dedicated to responding to the record number of mental health crisis calls.
And also remember our patients, okay?
It's a crisis for our community, it's a crisis for police, and we found it necessary to implement a citywide co-response unit.
The department says officers are now responding to an average 39 calls a day, nearly 9,000 runs this year alone. Calls known to be more volatile, unpredictable, and at least twice last fall in Detroit, deadly.
Is this new unit working?
I think it is, but I don't, I'm not going to declare victory.
The team is armed with additional, less lethal weapons.
The standard officer doesn't walk around with this.
No, sir.
And looks different than other officers, driving cruisers with green lights, in the summer wearing khakis and green polos.
My uniform says George, so it's not Sergeant George or P.O. George, it's just George.
2 officers travel with the specialists from the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network.
You're not a sworn officer?
No.
You're unarmed?
Very much so.
We watched how in between emergency calls, teams visited folks they previously encountered.
Once a week they ride by just to make sure he's okay. And they also, help me and keep me calm.
Like Lucretia Skinner's son, Darren, who is bound to a wheelchair and suffers from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder.
I mean, you're talking about your son here.
My son,
How much
Darren,
did you
yes.
hesitate calling 911?
I called 911 because I need the help.
You created a unit, isn't that great? Issued them rubber bullets, issued them bolo nets. This is unheard of in a police department. You just came up with this plan. I know you looked around the country, but when you went and said to folks, we're not going to go with live ammo, we're going to use rubber bullets. You want to sign up for this unit? How did that go?
Oh, the union called me. I told them we're not going to just use rubber bullets, but in situations where we can apprehend someone who is in mental health crisis, yes, they're posing a threat. We know our training tells us that we've got a 6-foot reactionary gap. If that person is moving, like that person was immobile, but they could have a knife and he's in a bed. If he were going to cut his wrist or try to stab himself, we could deploy that rubber bullet or that bolo wrap in those instances.
So people are wondering, how does a police chief dream this up? The reason when the chief came to me and said, I want you to fund this, I believed in him, is we have a police chief who's got a master's degree in mental health and is a licensed mental health counselor. I'm pretty sure that's the only one. But tell me how a guy who's working full-time as a cop starts taking college classes in mental health.
Well, I have a loved one that's been in mental health crisis his whole life. The revolving door of the system would be that when he would go manic, we would take him to various facilities and they would release him and back onto the street. And, he would find himself in many different situations. Sometimes I would get a call and sometimes I wouldn't. He's not responsible for his conduct. He has a condition he didn't ask for, didn't want, but it affects his everyday thinking patterns. So I wanted to understand it better. I took a class here and there and it became very interesting to me. And then it became almost my responsibility as a person who cared for him and a person who was an assistant chief at the time and the biggest department in the state to know a little bit about something that's impacting our day to day. And I continued to go and pay and, a lot. And when I was done, I had my master's and I said, I'm going to go get my license and start doing therapy.
So you're so frustrated with the mental health system with somebody in your family, you go take college courses.
Yep.
To do it and then decide to help others. Now, you cops are pretty kind of tough, macho. When you were assistant chief, you're basically the number 3 person in the department. When your colleagues found out you were going to mental health class and going to be a counselor, how did they react to it?
You know, it's interesting. So a couple kind of teased me a little bit, like, you're gonna be a counselor, you're not a nice person, you know? So, like, I am a nice person. You know, what was interesting though is that many of them were like, man, we need this. Because not only is the impact being felt in the community, but it's being felt inside the police department. When you see this level of violence and you see some of the things our officers see, no one thinks about, you know, what they're going through. So the ask that I got was, once you're done, can we build something internally too for the officers?
And what's at stake for the department is tragic, as you know. We had Wayne State officer Colin Rose shot and killed by somebody who had been in and out of the mental health system repeatedly, came up on him and with no warning was killed. Case went unsolved for several months, and talk about how we ultimately got the shooter.
Yeah, very sad case. Two officers that worked the case, one investigator and two officers, identified the person who was suspected of committing the crime, did a workup on him, recognized that he had mental issues, he did some time in the military, he knew firearms, he knew how to address a threat, so it was very difficult to get him into custody. We put an operation out, we were able to identify where he was in our city. Unfortunately, upon approaching him, he went into a military mode. His mind took him back to the military, and he was able to shoot two of our officers, shooting one in the neck, ending his career, but thank goodness he's alive, and the other one recovered from his injuries. Second group of officers were able to get him into custody, and initially he was found to be unable to stand trial due to his mental illness, but he shouldn't have been on the street.
And as you were, I visited these two officers in the hospital with serious gunshot injuries, and all they said is, we got the guy who shot Colin Rose, but it's a reminder when the mental health system breaks down. It's our police officers, and it's the family members
Absolutely.
of these people. And then the second one, which shortly after you took over, Lauren Courts drove up on a call just as he's pulling up, shot and killed before he even got out of his car. 19-year-old who had had 7 different run-ins with a Macomb County Police Department. The mother had tried everything. And I want to read you this quote, because here's what she said on an earlier police run. He's been having these problems since he was a kid, since he was a teenager, and every time I call the police to try to get help from the state, they say because he's not threatening to kill me or himself, he's not on drugs, they won't do anything, until eventually he did snap and didn't kill somebody. But this is the struggle these families are having.
Mm-hmm. It is, and this case, you know, this is a call that I got that I pray I never get again. Young officer, beautiful family, wife, 2 kids, working very hard for us in the 2nd precinct. Gets a call, family's frustrated with the 19-year-old. They own a business, they are allowing him to live above the business. He goes manic and becomes, at least it's stated that he's suicidal. He was not. Officers respond that he's up on the 2nd floor of this business, creating some type of problem. Upon arrival, the moment they drove up, he leans out of the front window and shoots down into the windshield, striking our officer right through his vest and ultimately killing him. Just a horrible case. Then he leaves the building. And comes down and starts twirling his weapon on the street. 2 other officers have to address him, and they were able to get him into custody. Unfortunately, they had to shoot him, and he succumbed to his injuries. Should not have happened. This officer was probably going to be police chief one day. I know his family. His father is a retired police officer. It's not a day that goes by I don't think about him and the importance of this work and the importance of getting this mental health system fixed so we never have another Lauren Courts.
So in response to this, you created an entirely new unit, different types of uniforms, different approach, mental health counselor paired up. I'm going to show you how different it is and talk about a massive culture change. But it's a little hard to hear some of this because these are actual body cams. But in this case, call came out, armed a man, psychotic break on the porch. We have to blur the face for privacy, but if you can see his face, he's crying, he's in agony, and we've shortened this because these are very long, patient conversations. But I want you to watch and see what our officers are now doing to try to de-escalate and disarm folks as opposed to demanding they drop the gun or we shoot. So watch what this unit's doing now.
Pull out the gun. Marty, what has you irritated? Can y'all stop? Come on, please, no. I want to leave. This is not about to call for me. I'm not on shit. I'm not going to pull out the gun, none of that. I'm just trying to help. I'm not going to pull out the gun. Marty, what has you irritated today? How you know my name? Mom, let us know. What the?
You good, bro? Let's just relax. Come up off that, man. Hey, look, let me get this some more mans. Let me grab that from you. Here, look, I got you, bro. Look, I'm good. Just let me get that. I ain't on nothing. No. You good. You good, bro. You straight, like I told you, man. Where's that, right here? You good. What's it, the FN? You good, bro? Like I told you, we good. We just search you up, all right? You ain't got nothing else? All right, put your hands down, man. You good. Relax. You good. Relax. Calm down. This ain't, relax, bro. You good. It's your fam?
I don't know who that is, though.
Look like your brother, right? It's your brothers?
I don't know who that is.
Okay, bro. You good, man. Don't worry about it, all right? Hey, hold him back, though. Appreciate you, dog. Appreciate you, man. Hey, which one?
Anybody ride with him?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Just slide over.
Slide over.
All right. Your officer walked up and took a live gun from a very unstable individual, and then they walked him without handcuffs with his family to the car. Now, I got to tell you, I'm watching that video thinking those last 4 or 5 steps had to be scary for that officer, and yet they didn't hesitate.
They didn't, and that's the training. And what you didn't see is the first officer who was concentrating on him, had he went for the gun, would have addressed him. The second officer is working off the first officer, and once he builds that rapport, he's then giving him the signal to come in and get the gun. And so it worked to perfection. Doesn't always work to perfection, but that's what this training does. It brings in a different uniform. It brings in different lights. The first name is on the uniform and not the sergeant or the officer, whomever, and it de-escalates the environment.
So we got a second call here last year. A woman threatening suicide had 2 knives, very sharp knives, and as they go in, it'll be a little hard to see, but you'll see it. They convince her to drop the first knife, and they say thank you, and then have to get the second knife before she kills herself. But look at how different this response is than drop the knife or I'll shoot.
Why should I care about anything in this world?
Because we want to help you. We want to help you. Whatever you want to do, we want to make sure you can do that.
You want to
okay? I do.
This shit.
No.
And allow us to help you where nobody else has in the past. We're a new unit. We're a different unit. We're a different kind of police. And you can trust us, okay? And we don't want to see you hurt yourself. We don't. Like I said, you sound intelligent, you're beautiful, okay? And you deserve a chance.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to help you, okay?
Good.
Can we get the other one?
Please.
Thank you so much.
Please.
We appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Drop it, yeah. Okay.
Come on,
That's
honey.
it, that's it.
Come on, honey.
You got it. Just drop it.
Can I give you a hug? Can I give you a hug, honey?
I felt the same way the last 2 or 3 steps. Well, she still had that knife in her hand, and your officer felt under control.
You did, and it's just amazing. I look at these videos every week, and it's incredible. And you know, the work that they're doing and what they're encountering is just absolutely incredible.
And so you have had to build up a duplicate mental health system where you keep your own addresses, your own data, 1,000 of your residents with 3 or more calls, so that when your folks pull up on an address, they aren't going in blind and surprised as Officer Courts did. Talk about what it took to build that kind of database in the Detroit Police Department.
A lot of collaboration. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Tricia Stein from the mayor's office. I mean, she helped build, yes.
There you go. Tricia's got some fans here, all right.
really helped build this database out. And you know, Tricia, she blows down front doors to get things done. And she was able to get in spaces I couldn't. And now when our officers get a call, they know what they're going into. They know, and think about if Lauren Courts knew. Think about if he knew not to drive up to that building. We know that this person's been aggressive with the police. We know what type of medication they're on, what their triggers are. So it's very impactful. But the biggest thing to come out of this is that we've got a mental health co-responder civilian on the 911 call. So when that family member calls 911 and says, my loved one is in crisis, we've now got a mental health professional that can start the triage process right then and there.
So I'm going to embarrass you right now. Because you send your folks into harm's way on a regular basis. But there was a day, a barricaded gunman a week, where the barricaded gunman who had already shot and killed somebody said, I'm only coming out if I see Chief White. And so let's talk about what happened on that day.
Top cop putting his own life on the line for peace.
The chief going face to face with an armed suspect accused of murder.
He says that he wants to talk to me. And so if he comes out, I'm telling him right now, I will walk him to that EMS rig, get him the help that he needs.
A promise kept.
Moments later, the chief escorting the suspect to treatment.
We don't want another tragedy. We want these things to end peacefully.
So what was it like? And it was terrible. Somebody had delivered a package to the wrong house. The neighbor went to pick up the package, and the homeowner shot, killed her. The body was still there in the street because they couldn't get near it. You had to step out to greet the gunman to get him to put down the gun and come out. What was that like?
Well, I mean, I've done it before, but this first time as chief, of course, had a little help with me, as you could see. But what really was interesting with this case is that this guy had livestock in his house. He was suffering from a mental crisis, and he had an arsenal in his house and was prepared to use it, and told us that. But he knew that somehow he figured out that I had a mental health background and said he would be the only one that I trust, and if I came, he wouldn't hurt anybody. So you have to do it.
And you walked him out, and you showed the department your commitment to the different kind of department that we built.
Thank you.
And so we know what we need to do. We need more community treatment. I'll ask the people here, if you had a visitor from out of town, they got sick, ran a high fever, not bad enough to go to an emergency room, but needed to see a doctor or an urgent care center, how many of you would know where to take them? Okay? Now, if somebody from out of town had a panic attack, not enough to go to an emergency room, how many of you know what mental health clinic you take them to? You say almost nobody. And so we need more of these community treatment centers. We need more of the 72-hour psych units. 40% of the time, we've got people who should be committed to psych units who are walking out of the emergency room before there's a bed available. We've got 200 or 300 people long-term. We need money for all of these things, but we want to take a minute to thank the progress that is being made. And tomorrow, we're going to honor Debbie Stabenow. But Debbie got our mental health clinics Medicaid access like the physical health clinics. They opened 13 originally, and with the support of Governor Whitmer and the legislature, there's now 30 community care clinics opening across the state, and they're continuing to do more. We do have people who are making great progress. And Governor Whitmer last week signed a bill so private insurers now have to provide coverage at the level of they do on the health care. I'd say in the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen more commitment from the governor and the legislature, but we've got so much more to go. And as you and I know, and we've got more facilities built across the state, our crime rate reduction came from a 10-year plan. And here's my thought, is there money in the system? Macomb County did a study. 25% of the inmates in their jail had previously been hospitalized for mental illness. You say we're going to cut down state psychiatric beds because we want to deinstitutionalize? We're reinstitutionalizing county jail. In the rural jails, 34% have serious illness, 23% of the state prisoners. And when, under federal Medicaid, when you go into prison, the feds stop paying for the treatment. County sheriffs in Michigan have been leading this for a while. They said, the very time they go into the jail, we need the treatment, the money shuts off. But I say this, why can't we have a long-term plan that says every year we say to the prison and jail system, we're going to cut you just 2% a year. Move that over to the mental health system. Let's hire more folks. Let's shift this. Over 10 years, could we fundamentally move these folks out of the jails and prison to treatment? Would that work?
I think so. I really do. And I think if you can address the mental health crisis, you'll see reductions in everything from domestic violence to drug use and drinking, because these people are self-medicating because of the feelings that they have, the emotions that they're going through. I think you will see a downturn across the board if we are able to do this.
So Wayne County Sheriff Ray Washington told me earlier today that he asked that we please stop making the Wayne County Jail the largest mental health facility in Wayne County. That was his request, which is what we have. And so our point today was not to say we have a solution. Our point today was to raise the consciousness. See, we're talking to legislators, you're talking to the governor. Okay, this matters. It matters to the individual family members. When they're released, they're back in these houses and the family members are in danger. It matters to the police. But as you look at this and you think about the department that you joined, a department where officers were trained, if there is a threat coming at you, you shoot at mass, you shoot at the chest till the threat is stopped. Isn't that the way you were trained?
That's where we were trained.
That was the culture of police departments across the country. When you look at this and what you've done with the culture of the Detroit Police Department, how do you feel?
Extreme pride. Just extreme pride with the men and women of the Detroit Police Department and being able to embrace a different concept in policing and being willing to do so. These are all volunteers. I'm not forcing them to do this. These are officers that have signed up once they saw what we were looking for and they're hearing about the results and they're committed. They are absolutely committed.
So let's give a big hand for a great leader, our police chief, James White.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving, we support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
We help organizations find their voices through what they do and who they impact. We are VVK PR and Creative, a Detroit agency telling the stories of critical issues affecting the big picture and the small moments. Stories at Skyline Heights and on-the-ground influence. We lead with relationships first, solutions always, and with diversity as our compass. VVK PR and Creative.